one of these just turned up. So basically everything you need to know before hiring a builder. So we have our JCT Minor Works building contract in front of us. Now what this does is sets out all the contract particulars. It's basically your Bible when you're in contract with a builder, and it says exactly what they are to do, exactly what you are to do, and it sets everything out in a nice, orderly fashion in a neat package, and both you and the builder can use this both to your advantage and to the mutual benefit of having an agreed contract, agreed terms, and an agreed process to do everything. And really, it just stops arguments later down the line. So the times that I would use this, and that I do use this in my own projects, is usually when the contract value gets above around £50,000, give or take. The contract itself to buy is about £30 online, and it just stops disputes. So the 50k mark I find is good, because under that it's pretty simple, and you can run the contract, in WhatsApp messages and emails, and as long as you've got everything in writing, and it's quite easy to agree things. Once contract value goes above 50-ish k, you start looking at multiple facets to the subcontract, to the contract, sorry. And it gets more complicated. You might be building an extension and a loft conversion. There are more moving parts, more drawings, more things that could go wrong or that couldn't be included. So really you're just securing both your position and your builder's position as to what has been agreed. I might use it in a lower value contract if I know the work is particularly tricky, or there are unknown parts, unknown variables to it, known unknowns that I don't yet know about, and anything, any work, any complicated works that could benefit from having a contract. So to start us off, we've got our Minor Works building contract, and in this, you as the developer or person getting construction work done, you are the employer and your builder is the contractor, and the document itself will be known as the contract. Now JCT produce a range of contracts, and the Minor Works one is going to be the most relevant for the work that we're doing. So we're going to use the example of my lower ground floor extension as a sort of case study for filling this out. So as we go down, let me do this more smoothly. So we go to the first page. It tells you when you would use it, when you wouldn't use it. Contents page. So this is anytime you need to find something in the document, lays it all out. Obviously the agreement. So the first thing you would fill out, this agreement is made on the date between the employer, which is yourself, the contractor, which is the contractor. There are recitals and contract particulars and articles in here. So I think what we'll do is we'll come back to these, and it's better to understand the contract, what it does and how it operates, and then we'll come back to filling out our contract particulars here. So I'm going to skip past all of these, skip past signing as a deed or not, and we go to our conditions. So section 1, definitions and interpretation. So this is going to set out what the agreement is. You've got your insurances here, what's covered. We're defining all the terms of the subcontract, and whenever this comes up in the contract now, they will be capitalised because they're defined terms. So we'll skip past this because it's just a reading exercise. You can read this. Now section 2, carrying out the work. This forms part of the contractor's obligation, so what he has to do as part of the contract. So 2.1, the contractor shall carry out and complete the works in a proper and workmanlike manner and in compliance with the contract documents, the construction phase plan and statutory requirements, and shall give all notices required by the statutory requirements. So in brief, what this covers, and along with 2.12, insofar as the quality of material standards of workmanship are stated to be a matter for the architect/contract administrator's approval, such as quality and standards shall be to his reasonable satisfaction. So this is, in a nutshell, saying he's got to do work which a court of law would argue is of a good quality, a good standard, and it's got to also be to the architect or contract administrator's approval. So in this case, you as the employer could also be the contract administrator. If you don't want to pay your architect a kind of contract admin fee and to run the project as a project manager, you might only pay them for the RIBA stages 1, preparation of brief, 2, the concept design, spatial coordination, technical design, but then not ask for the manufacturing and construction stage where they would be managing the on-site works. So you would be project managing this yourself. Carrying out the works, it's got to be done in a workmanlike manner. It's got to be to a good, satisfactory quality and standard. You can't hand over something that is half built or has defects and expect that to be completed work. So this protects you from a quality standpoint. Now, to prove the quality of works, we can reference other documents, British standards, for example. Although, in my opinion, they probably set the bar quite low for what the expected standard is. Point 3, the contractor shall take all reasonable steps to encourage contractors' persons to be registered card holders under the CSCS scheme or qualified under an equivalent recognised qualification scheme. So all this says is the people that the contract hires to complete the work must be qualified to do the work. So commencement, the works may be commenced on or shall be completed by the respective dates stated in the contract particulars. So we'll fill that bit out later. All that's saying is you have to start when you're told to start and you have to finish when you're told to finish. Architect/contract administrator's duties. So the architect/contract admin, which again could be yourself, shall issue any further information and instructions necessary for the proper carrying out of the works and all certificates required by these conditions. Anything else we want them to do, we have to issue an instruction to do it. Correction of inconsistencies is 2.4. Any inconsistency in or between the contract drawings, the contract specification and the work schedules shall be corrected, and any such correction which results in an addition, omission or other change shall be treated as a variation under clause 3.6.1. So that will cover variations. So what we're saying is, say for example, one drawing shows a wall in a certain place and another one doesn't. It will be treated as a variation to either add that wall or remove it depending on where it is shown in the contract documents, and if it is agreed elsewhere that wall is to be built or isn't to be built. It doesn't mean that because there's a mistake you as the employer have to pay for it. It just means that the mistake has to be rectified as a variation. Inconsistencies, divergences from statutory requirements, or skip past these. Fees or charges are legally demandable, so contractor shall pay any fees or charges legally demandable under the statutory requirements, and they shall not be reimbursable to the contractor by the employer unless otherwise agreed. Extensions of time. So here we start getting into more contractual matters. It's something that we have to understand as an administrator of the contract. If it becomes apparent that the works will not be completed by the date for completion as stated in the contract particulars. So in our first particular, we're going to say we start on January the 1st and we want it complete by February the 5th. If it's not completed by that date, the subcontractor should ask for an extension of time. So your builder has to come to you with a notice that says, I would like an extension of time to complete the project. Now, he has to issue that notice to you. So the contractor shall thereupon notify the architect or contract admin where the delay occurred. He has to notify you. So where that delay occurs for reasons beyond the control of the contractor, including compliance with an instruction that are not occasioned by a default of the contractor, the architect or contract admin shall give such extension of time for completion as may be reasonable and notify the parties accordingly. So all it's saying is, if it's something out of his control, then out of the contractor's control, then he's due an extension of time. So say we set our contract for the extension, and then I say, oh, actually, I want it to be 2 floors instead of 1. There's a lot more work involved. So we're saying, you know what, at the end of that, he is due for an extension of time. The contract period has to be increased. Instead of finishing on the 5th of Feb, we might say, okay, now he's actually got a load more time and he's to finish on the 5th of June instead. Now, there are items in there that you might think are out of his control, but actually are. So this next part says, reasons within the control of the contractor include any default of the contractor or any contractor's person or of any of their respective suppliers of goods or materials for the work. So say he's purchasing the bifold doors, for example, and the manufacturer says to him, sorry, we can't get them in time, we're going to be 3 weeks late, pushing back the completion date for the project. That, as per section 2.7, that is in his control, because it's something that he has bought. He is supplying those goods and materials, so he would not be due an extension of time for that reason. Now, as the employer, you might say, in that instance, if your builder comes to you and says, I can't get the materials in time, you might say, well, have you tried other suppliers who might be able to get it in time? And just because it might cost more from another supplier doesn't mean he's due an increase in the contract sum. It's his duty as the contractor to supply the goods by the respective time period. Another one is the weather. So just because there's been some snow at Christmas time doesn't necessarily mean he's due an extension of time, because you might say, well, we knew there would be snow at Christmas time. It's quite likely there'll be rain and snow at Christmas time. So unless it was, say, a 1 in 100 years storm or event, he would not be due time for that, for being late due to weather. So damages for non-completion. If the works are not completed by the date for completion, as stated in the contract particulars, the employer may require the contractor to pay or allow to the employer liquidated damages at the rate stated in the contract particulars between such date for completion and the date of contractual completion. So liquidated damages is a pre-agreed amount of money, effectively, that you agree that if the contractor is late by say a week, that he will pay to you as the employer as compensation for that. So if it was a buy-to-let property, for instance, and you knew you were going to earn £250 a week from that property, you might say, well, for each week you are late, you are costing me £250. So we would put in the subcontract, if you are late past the 5th of Feb, for each week or part thereof, you, the contractor, must pay me £250 per week to compensate my loss for you being late. So that is a liquidated damage. It's pre-agreed. The other thing that we can use is a unliquidated damage. So an unliquidated damage effectively is just an unagreed amount of loss and expense that we wish to recover. So if we didn't put a liquidated damages figure in the subcontract, that doesn't mean that we can't claim for unliquidated damages, which is our loss and expense. Now we've got to note that it can't be a penalty. We can't say if you're late by a week, it's £20,000, because that's a penalty and it's not a real reflection of the loss and expense that we predict that we will incur. So other costs we might incur, we might have electricity and gas bill, interest on the finance for the project that we're undertaking, loan repayment charges. If there's a fee, say, to the person who's renting your house from you, that you might have to put them up in a hotel for a week or so because the project's not finished. Those are all loss and expense that you've incurred that you can then levy against your contractor. The only other thing with that is you have to notify them. You have to notify your contractor that he's late. You have to tell him he's late. You have to issue him a notice of non-completion. And if you intend to deduct the damages in 2.8.3, we have to tell them. So if the employer intends to deduct any such damages from the sum stated as due in the final certificate or thereafter recover them as a debt, he shall additionally notify the contractor of that intention not later than the date of issue of the final certificate. And we'll cover what the final certificate is later. Practical completion. So that is the date where, in the opinion of us as the administrator, the works have reached practical completion and the contractor has complied sufficiently with clause 3.9 in respect of the supply of documents and information. Now there's no set in stone definition of what practical completion actually is, but if we use as a guide the house must be in a state, say my extension, it must be in a state that I can use it, that I can live in, the kitchen's in there, the walls are up, it's fully airtight, it's movable in, it's painted, it's ready. So there might be slight snagging issues, there might be a couple of scuffs on the wall, small decorating items, a bit of mastic that needs doing, but it's still practically complete. Then we'll give him his certification of practical completion. He can have a small snagging period to rectify any snags and a defects liability period in which he will rectify any defects after completion of the works. So defects, if any defects, shrinkages or other faults in the works appear within the rectification period, so that the rectification period So if any defects, shrinkages or other faults in the works appear within the rectification period due to materials, goods or workmanship not in accordance with this subcontract, so we've already laid out what our quality expectations are, we shall not later than 14 days after the expiry of the rectification period notify the contractor. So after the rectification period, we've got 14 days to tell him exactly what went wrong in that period of time. So, making good. Defects, shrinkages, very common. Your plasterwork may crack and it just needs a bit of making good on there. Other faults entirely. So this has got to be at the contractor's cost. He can't then charge you day work rates to get the decorator back in and fix things. So there we go. With the employer's consent, instructs otherwise. If he instructs otherwise, an appropriate deduction may be made for the contract sum. 2.11. When in his opinion the contractor's obligations under 2.1 have been discharged, the architect, contract admin shall forthwith issue a certificate specifying the date they were discharged. So that is everything you need to know really about section 2 of the JCT Subcontract Minor Works. I think we'll continue this in the next episode, as I don't want to make a 2-hour video in one go on the JCT. So next time I'll upload Section 3, potentially Section 4 of the JCT. We'll continue through our journey of discovering how to use the JCT in our building subcontracts. Remember to like, any comments and subscribe to the channel to learn more and continue the channel's growth. Thanks.